JJ. I'm here today to talk to you about the tools that you can get out from the tool library to do fruit tree pruning. Today we'll also go into a little bit more about how to approach a tree and some very basic information about how to prune your fruit trees or vines. This is a great time of year to do it. Aside from the fact that it's snowing, February and into March is usually a really great time to prune your fruit trees. Fruit tree pruning is something that I've been doing for about 10 years in this region. So when I'm fruit tree pruning, there are a couple different tools that I use. Here we have first hand pruners, also known as secateurs or snips. Hand pruners we use on smaller diameter wood to just do a lot of different types of cuts. They are bypass pruners, which means the blade bypasses the sort of anvil part, and they are a single beveled tool. So a single beveled tool means that you just sharpen one side and not both. What we have here today is a hand sharpener that you can use to sharpen the one side of your tool. So what I do is I just take my tool and I match it to the angle of the edge of the blade. You can see there's an sort of angle there, and I'm matching it, and then I'm just drawing it across the blade as straight as I can. Having a sharp tool when you're pruning your fruit tree is very important because it's a lot like surgery. You're making a wound on the tree, and the cleaner and smoother that wound is, the better it's going to heal. These hand pruners, usually you want to cut not really more than 3/4 of an inch diameter wood with them. If I need to cut a larger branch, I size up my tool. The next size tools that we have here at the tool library are these. They're called Loppers. Here we have two different kinds of Loppers. This is an anvil pruner. This is a bypass pruner. So this is the same type of blade that the hand pruners that I just showed you have. This anvil pruner is a bit different. The blade doesn't pass this base, it just crunches like this. There's no bypassing. This is also a double bevel blade, so if you're sharpening this, you do need to sharpen both sides. So it's different from the hand pruners that I just showed you. They both work. They both need to be sharp. These can prune probably up to about 2 inches in diameter, 1.5 to 2 inches, depending on the sharpness of the blade and also the type of wood. I find fig is much easier to cut through, for instance, than plum wood. Diameter than that, larger than 2 inches, I start to get into my saws. This tool, this smaller saw is really great for probably 2 to 3, even up to 4 diameter branches. The next saw that I use, this is for larger diameter cuts. So this will do a 2-inch cut very quickly. But sometimes the teeth are a little bit bigger and sometimes it can get a bit snaggy. So I usually use this for 3-inch and up diameter cuts. If you're doing larger diameter, if you're removing larger branches, there is also a way to do that safely. You don't just want to start sawing away where you want your cut to be. You want to first remove the weight. Another great tool, I like this guy. It's another long reach tool. This is basically a pair of hand pruners on the end of a long aluminum extendable pole. So that's very handy to do some of the finishing work that we like to do on trees. Get the smaller diameter growth way up high. So as I'm extending it, there's little holes along the length of the pole, and it clicks in to each one. And in order for the mechanism to work, like the pruner to actually snip, it needs to be clicked into the holes. So if you're having trouble making it work, it might just be because it's in between the holes. And it makes a nice satisfying click sound like that. This tool is basically a long reach lopper. So this next size up that we talked about, where you do more like kind of 2-inch diameter wood, this is basically the same blade, same idea. The only difference is it's connected to a rope, so the blade comes up from below. Ladders are a great tool in the orchard. They can help you get higher up into the tree safely and allow you to work in the crown of the tree, which is really important for larger trees. You want to be able to manage the crown so that you can manage its growth, and you also, opening up the crown is a really important part of opening up the tree for airflow and light penetration, which is something we'll talk about in a little bit. So your standard orchard ladder is actually quite different from probably a lot of ladders that you have around your house. These ladders are designed specifically to be used on soft ground, so like soil, grass, what have you, and uneven ground. You should not use these ladders on pavement. What will happen, there's no padding on the bottom and there's no grip on the bottom of these. So if you put this on a cement or asphalt base, it's gonna slide right out. It's not safe. This typically you want to have a 70 to 75 degree angle, I think is the one, but it's about this. So those are your tools. The last thing I'll say about tools, so sharp tools, using the right size tools for the diameter of branch, and then cleaning your tools. So I have 99% rubbing alcohol that I use, and an old toothbrush, and I just dip it in there. Just wipe down the blades and any parts of the tool that are going to come into contact with the cut that I'm making. And I just do that on my tools in between every fruit tree. And it's a good habit to get into because you can spread disease using your tools between trees of the same variety. So it's a good habit just to always clean them in between. Now that we've sharpened and cleaned our tools, we can go and cover some of the pruning basics with the tool library. Here we are in front of a small apple tree. Now we're just going to go through briefly some of the whys of pruning and then two important types of cuts that you're going to use that's going to just sort of guide your whole pruning process. So why do we prune fruit trees? There's a couple of reasons. A big reason that we prune fruit trees in this climate is because we do live in a moist climate, and a lot of the disease issues that we see are related to excess moisture. So pruning the tree so it's open and there's good sunlight penetration and airflow is a major reason for pruning. That extra sunlight can also really help with the fruit quality. And then we prune to remove disease material. We prune to prevent damage. So if you don't prune your fruit tree, sometimes what can happen is the structure of the tree can grow in such a way that it can't actually support all the fruit that is along its branches, and you get breakage. You see that in a lot of older trees or trees that have been unpruned for a long time. Branches get overloaded with fruit and they break. Those breakage points can be entry points for disease and decay, and that will just affect the longevity of your tree. So we prune to prevent damage, increase the lifespan of our tree, improve the fruit quality by opening it up for sunlight, decrease the incidence of disease by opening it up to airflow and sunlight, and then also for human access. So pruning your fruit tree so that you can actually put your ladder in and get up into the tree and reach the fruit is very important. That is going to also make sure that you're enjoying the tree, and the more likely that you are to enjoy the tree, the more likely you're to take better care of it, and again, that's good for the fruit tree's long-term health. Those are the main reasons that we prune. There's a lot of different shapes and sizes that fruit trees and vines come in. But the two main things that you need to know about when you're about to prune your tree is the type of cut that you are going to be, the two types of cuts that you're going to be using. So there's heading cuts and thinning cuts. And a good understanding of those two cuts and the reaction that the tree is going to have to it will really help guide you in shaping your tree no matter what size or shape you want it to be in. So something to think about when you're pruning your fruit tree is that at this time of the year, in the dormant season, all of the energy is in the roots. And as the tree wakes up in the spring, the energy that's coming up out of the roots and into the fruit tree is going to basically be seeking the same pathways that it left behind in the fall. So it kind of like remembers that this branch was here. So when we are pruning, that's helpful to keep in mind because one of the types of cuts that we use is a heading cut. And a heading cut is when you prune or cut, make a cut at any point along the length of a branch. So if I cut this branch here, that's a heading cut, that's a heading cut, that's a heading cut, a third, half, 2/3. Those are all considered heading cuts. And what happens, how the tree reacts to that is in the spring when it wakes up, the energy comes up the branch and it basically hits a roadblock. And what happens when there's a roadblock in the middle of a busy highway is cars start to take side streets. So we get buds, all of the buds below the cut, the top 3 buds below the cut are going to start pushing branches. So a heading cut is when you cut anywhere along the branch and the response that the tree does is to push out new branches. So heading cuts help us to fill space, they give us branching options, and they also shorten branches and allow them to thicken so they become more structurally sound. Any heading cut should be made either to a bud or a lateral branch. So on a smaller branch like this, if I'm doing a heading cut, I always want to cut to a bud within 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch of the bud, really 1/8 of an inch of the bud, and slanting away from the bud. That's a standard heading cut. The other type of cut is a thinning cut. And a thinning cut is removing a branch at its source. So if I was going to do a thinning cut on this branch, I would go all the way back to where it comes out of its parent branch and cut it back there. Now a thinning cut, the tree reacts differently to a thinning cut than a heading cut. Rather than coming up and sort of hitting a roadblock, the energy of the tree will kind of bypass that detour basically and keep going straight along the existing branches, and you're less likely to get a lot of branching as regrowth. So thinning cuts quite literally thin out the tree. They are for creating space, they're for opening up airflow and sunlight penetration and just sort of removing material from the tree. So if you keep those 2 things in mind, heading cuts give you branching options and create branches, and thinning cuts remove. That can really help you guide the direction that you want your tree to go in. So start with your bigger cuts first, move to smaller, and think about the shape that you want the tree. The classic shape that a lot of fruit trees are pruned to in this region is the open vase. So again, that's like 4 or 5 or 6 big scaffolding branches that sort of are in an open style rather than the Christmas tree with the single central leader and branches coming out. And when you're pruning, a good rule of thumb to keep in mind is you don't want to be removing more than 30% of the tree's material at a time. So thank you for coming to the Victoria Tool Library's fruit tree pruning tutorial. We've been pruning fruit trees today on the traditional territories of the Lekwungen-speaking people, represented by the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. The history of fruit trees on this continent is very much intertwined with colonization and dispossession of land. If you want to learn more about that, and I encourage you to, give it a Google. Also, if you're watching us from somewhere else than Victoria and you don't know whose territories you're on, also a great time to give it a Google. All the tools today that we have been using are available at the Victoria Tool Library, so if you're not a member already, sign up, come down, take them out, and get pruning.
Filming!
I wish I had started everyone like this. That would be amazing.
Yum yum!
Yummy, I'm a deer.
I wish that's all the deer did to our garden.
I know, just gummed them lightly.